It's according to Schubert. Then I spoke about inward and outward knowledge, and different inward and outward approach to knowing. And we came to this level of distinguishing consciousness which operates on the innermost level, where the faculties of sight, hearing, word and thought are not yet totally distinguished because there are no languages for them to distinguish them. So they operate differently as secret operations, and of course we can impose on them this terminology of the faculties and call those secret operations as mind and word, as Sriaurobindo does in his poetry in Savage. He speaks about supramental word or mind or hearing or vision. But these are translations of these faculties through our lower level, where we have already languages to dress them in. So once we are using language to present them, we would have them as mind, word, hearing and seeing. But on the higher level, they are known rather as samjnana, ajnana, vijnana and prajnana. Consciousness operates differently there, where there is no yet human word, or there is no yet human vision or embodied vision of this universe. So it's an adhyatmic level where the creation did not yet take totally place. Yeah? It's on that supramental level where it is being created. Another water level is so here they are again. We have secret operations on the magnetic level, faculties on adhidaic, that's what we know as the hearing, seeing and so on, and senses as indriyas, which are turned outside and create organs of sense. Eyes, ear and so on, skin, touch. We went through Sankhya, because the shift of paradigms is a very important thing. Sankhya views it in a way that all the indriyas are subordinate to the mind, sense mind, manas, which is called sixth sense. We spoke a little bit on karmendriyas, which are also very mysterious and interesting thing. According to the Vedic vision, they are blocking our perception and stealing the light of perception and storing it into the material inconscious, subconscious. And it is meaningful because somehow, and there is a big question, why do they do that? What's the reason of them stealing our higher perception and storing them into the subconscious cave? And then that subconscious cave has to be discovered and the light has to be released. So, and that is the secret of the Veda, that the higher faculties of higher forces of consciousness coming down to release them, those stored perceptions, treasures of our spiritual light. And finding of those treasures is the major topic in the Rig Veda. So they're going into that subconscious cave, destroy it, and release the herds of light. And they're traveling up, and they discover a new sun and new heaven. So it seems that within our subconscious cave something is brooding. Something is being prepared for a new manifestation. We do not know what it is. It's some kind of a secret. There must be this way that these karmendriyas or senses of action would steal our light and store it there for the purpose of transformation of material inconscient life. And then slowly it gets more and more transformed. And that is called the sacrifice. But one time they had to be released, and they will travel up to their source. So then most probably this is the symbol when our material nature will become ready to receive the spirit. Now it is not yet ready, it has to die every time, it has to change, it is not sustaining the spirit. That's why we have the death. Death itself is showing that our matter is not fitting to the requirements of the spirit. But one day there would be a change, and material manifestation would be in resonance with the spirit. So this was the big issue for the Vedic rishis. They always speak about immortality, and immortality not in terms of the spirit, but in terms of matter, which is a little bit too much to say nowadays. Even in religious terms, nobody speaks about it. Everybody thinks about immortality of the spirit, that our soul is immortal, it goes somewhere, lives there, but matter is mortal, always. But for the Vedic rishis, it was not so. And for Sri Aurobindo also. It's interesting. That's why he most probably was so busy with the Veda.
Can I comment?
Yes. Yeah, please.
No, I just saw something on television a couple of days ago, some experiment. They joined like a younger animal, I don't remember if it was a frog or something else, with an older one that was maybe diseased or, getting close to death. And they joined them together, and somehow the older one became cured, or became
You're talking
reversing the aging process due to the stem cells in the younger one getting used by the older one. So apparently there are stem cells in us that rejuvenate the cells when we're younger, and these kind of stop operating when we get older. And so they stop regenerating the cells or whatever. And so, I don't know, but it was an experiment showing, and it was suggestive of how we might be able to reverse or at least, slow down the aging process.
Right. There is a lot of talk on slowing down the aging process nowadays. I saw also several movies of this kind. Very interesting. They say that we can extend it to 10,000 years age or something like this. So it's doable, it seems, in the laboratories, but not yet in practice. But why not? What's the difference? 10,000 to 100 years, it's not a big difference. But it is not in immortality about what they were talking. That is something more fundamental. It is an achievement by evolution or something, where the matter is responding enough to the spirit. It means spirit doesn't have to leave. And till that time also the spiritual entity has to be formed. I'm speaking mystical English, yes, most probably, not scientific anymore. But we went into this realm of psychic being. So in psychic being, once it is formed and it is in front, it causes this first, 3 transformations. We will be talking about this. Psychic, spiritual, and supramental. That was the vision of Sri Aurobindo in all these years.
Matter is in fact immortal.
Right.
And it is only the organic matter that is not immortal.
Interesting.
So the distinction which is being made is that even physical immortality doesn't mean unlimited duration of the same thing. Immortality is a notion, a concept of constant creativity of the same in unlimited forms, which knows itself as the same in every form. And so if this was happening on the physical level, it wouldn't mean that the physical stays the same forever. It would mean that it's changing every second. So immortality doesn't mean linear duration, whether it's spiritual or physical.
Yeah, it means it is recapturing itself, or
Recreation, reinventing.
It is living, and it can live and go on vibrating and rebuilding itself by living. And by the way, a mother speaks about it. Even at that time, if we take separately one cell of even organic matter, it shows all the features of immortality. But if you put them together into the function, they immediately start doing this. So it's a problem of collaboration, which we see today very well in all the world.
Well, how the inorganic matter becomes organic, that itself is the great step forward.
Right. Animation of
The carbon and hydrogen and oxygen coming together, and from that inorganic elements, we have creation of life, and then that becomes organic, and then how it rots and decays and ages and
grows and
grows
reduces.
and transforms and so on.
Right.
So we have laws of conservation of matter and energy, and sometimes the two together. Matter can transform from one form into another, but the totality of it remains the same. These are fundamental laws of physics in some ways, laws of conservation of matter and energy.
Yeah.
Just one other point too. I mean, it could make a difference too, like if you could prolong life for requiring several hundred years of development of consciousness in order to, develop this supermental and, to a capacity where it could transform the body. So if we could also just prolong life through these kind of mental means or physical means, long enough that the spiritual development could unfold, could develop to a higher level, then they could work hand in hand. So,
Yeah, it can be very handy to have a few hundred years more. Yes, that's true. Yes, but right. Where was I? Once again. Yes, the immortality as a concept is a very interesting thing, and the Vedic rishis speak about the dynamic truth, which was lost in the post-Vedic period. This is what Rod was mentioning. It's not a static idea of immortality, it's a dynamic idea of immortality. That means it will adjust itself everywhere in a new fashion because it has a capacity, it has consciousness within itself, flexible enough to be living in all conditions. And that is interesting. That's something else than just statically living the same thing every day. It's not this type of immortality. But our mind can give only this first projection of static view. That's why we can't accept it. But if you look deeper, we will find more interesting ways of looking at it. Something else was there very interesting to mention. Yes, when you were talking, I just got this vision of Aitareya Upanishad, where it is said about this, that first he created this being, and then this being was functioning well, and right. I was doing this for you, but to see you. And once the being was created, he entered it, and that was interesting. And when he wanted to enter the form, he couldn't enter it by any capacity of these faculties. So they were not catching the matter. this is a question to how organic matter came into being. So there was something, but how to enter it was very difficult for the spirit. So it could enter it, could catch it only by death. The matter was not ready to receive the spirit, it was not flexible enough. So it had to catch it temporarily, so to say, to hold it for a while. And it was expressed in terms of growth, reproduction, and that this way of reproducing was the immortality of the spirit in matter by temporarily bits and pieces, by reincarnation. And it's kind of interesting that the idea of reincarnation comes into this kind
Well,
of...
even the idea itself has significant association with immortality. We say somebody has become a martyr, and therefore he's immortal. He has sacrificed for a cause, for something, and so in Hindi we say amar ho gaya. He's amar, he's immortal. It's because he's dead, but his contribution continues, and his idea continues. So we make ideas immortal. The matter and the matter, both inorganic matter and organic matter, and then the idea matter as a presence in itself.
And matter itself is immortal as we know it from physics, and energy is preservation of energy. In the law, the energy is just changing form, so immortality is here among us. So this was the about Sankhya, which was interesting, and we could discuss much more, but we have to go ahead. And there was a pre-Sankhya paradigm. And this is what was interesting for us to see, the three constant bandhas, and they were in this particular format I'm showing to you in this one. So we have 4 different faculties of consciousness: mind and sight as active and perceptive function of rupam in Upanishads, and Shrotram and Vak as active and perceptive faculties of nama, name. And we were talking about this, that everything has form and name. We know this form by the name and not by the form. We know it. So we have to apprehend it. Apprehending is the form. We apprehend the form, we see it's available, but we comprehend it by the name. We can't comprehend it by the form. And it's a kind of an interesting discovery, mind-blowing discovery. We have 2 faculties, comprehensive and apprehensive approaches. So they will be needed for us to study samjnana, jnana, vijnana, prajnana. There we will see them in action. So
I wonder whether that's where Advaita might come in, because Advaita, all is an appearance of mind. So all forms are an appearance of mind,
yes.
including ourselves.
Well, fooling because Advaita is looking for the spirit and not for the form. But it's kind of interesting, there was a reconsideration and Advaita started to look away from form, to the spirit, seeking the spirit. But before, rishis were interested in form and embodiment, and the embodiment of the spirit in form. For them it was much more interesting. They presumed the oneness, but they were looking for diversity. We are living in diversity and seeking for oneness, so to say. We are kind of, there was a reverse, They knew the oneness was there, but they were interested to see that oneness embodied in everything. They were so fascinated with the world and transformation of the world by the spirit, and that was called sacrifice. Transformation of every gross form by the spirit. It had to be offered to the spirit, to the higher consciousness, and these forces of higher consciousness are to come down and to transform it, to take it. And then there was kind of new possibilities built up in material life. But later, because they couldn't make it, Sri Aurobindo says, due to the failure of Vedic rishis to transform life, because humanity was not ready to take that, there was a reconsideration, and the whole spiritual tradition neglected nature, said it's impossible to change it. It's just a prison, imprisonment for the spirit, and we have to get rid of it and get out of it. And this is moksha, and everything else follows, and Advaita. Advaita dominated thinking. Yeah? Matter is not, and nature is not interesting anymore, it's false. And everybody, or even great thinkers, Ramana Maharshi, whoever you take, will think in this way. They would
It's
speak.
much false as an appearance.
Yeah, well, it's first for the philosophical mind, it's an appearance, and for those who apply it, it becomes false. And even Shankara says that it is mithya, jagan mithya. We know this statement very well. Brahman satya, Brahma satya, jagan mithya. So Brahman is the only truth, and the world is untrue. And that's why everybody wants to get out of here and never to be born again. Notice, never to be born again, which is very, very strange. Yeah, because why? There was an interview with somebody who was, I forgot whether it was a great dancer and artist in India, I forgot her name. And she was asked, what would you like in this life to achieve? She says, nirvana, to be never born again. But she's so beautiful. She already achieved so much in this life. Why not to be born again with this beauty? You see, the whole idea is wrong, to get out of here. But this would not be the solution for this world. It was not created for the purpose to run away from it. It was created for some reason to embody the spirit.
Nirvana does not imply that you're never wishing to come back here, as though you are now moving on to another level, which somehow as maybe more enticing, more heavenly, more grand, more exalting.
Right. But they mean this when they say directly what they mean. And you will find it interesting. Yes, I agree with it. It doesn't mean that. For me also. But for them, it seems.
But there are traditions that make it imply what you were saying that it doesn't imply. And so it's a matter of the culture of the spirit, which has taken place in different ways at different times. So that Sri Aurobindo is pointing out frequently that his interpretation of Isha Upanishad, and that all of this is for habitation by the divine spirit, not to be rejected, is not the normal interpretation that is given by Shankara and Vedanta. But then that doesn't mean that it wasn't given that earlier, but prior to that medieval period, and in fact it was different apparently in the beginning. So this is a kind of an existential question then, and it's like discussing immortality. What are we going to learn about the meaning of these spiritual concepts as a result of our studies and practices and teachings?
Yes. A new book has just been released called On Mortality by a medical doctor, a cancer specialist of Indian origin in USA. And he was there, I was attending the Jaipur Literature Festival, he was presenting it. It's a very fine book called On Mortality. And it's about the last stages of one's life in a hospital. What does death mean? As a practical existential question. And for a doctor, for a nurse, for a son, a daughter, a wife, a person whose father or grandfather is dying. A very fine book, and really invoking many questions.
I think he also gave Vashi with lectures.
Maybe you would want to just quickly define Samjana again, because some people here haven't been familiarized with those fundamental movements of consciousness.
So we have two different approaches to studies of consciousness. We study faculties as they are seeing, hearing, and so on. And there is another approach to the soul. So the soul, very difficult to approach, but Mother and Sri Aurobindo made it possible for us. They speak about the projection of the unborn self within our midst, and that is the spark of the divine or individual Purusha. So to say, Purusha who is from the universal becomes individual, and slowly in the process of evolution becoming individualized. That means he is using the faculties which are universal, of the universal Purusha. Sight, hearing, these are faculties of universal Purusha. They are all over in nature. Every creature here, insects and animals and fish have eyes. They have the faculty of seeing, the faculty of hearing, the faculty of touch, and so on. And it's kind of interesting that we are all using universal faculties, but we are individualized beings, so to say. And that's how we can communicate with one another and see one another and touch and interact, because we are utilizing the universal faculties of consciousness. But we are individuals. And this individual element is evolving. And as psychic being in human beings will become the representative of the universal Purusha. This was, I'm kind of rushing to the point where we left last time, but I had to review this because there would be no context for it. So Adhyatma can be started on these in terms of secret operations of consciousness and verities of the psychic being. Because the faculties of consciousness are not the same as psychic being's verities. The verities of psychic being as courage and goodness and generosity and gratitude, these are not the faculties of sight and hearing. And it's kind of interesting how they could coexist in one being, and where do they come from, as if coming from different sources or something. Sincerity. Is it a faculty of consciousness? Sincerity? Just think for a second. You will be surprised that we have it. How do we know what it is? Or gratitude. We can say these are feelings, but they are not totally feelings. They are something more than feelings.
But they have gone through an evolutionary process, what we call courage, what we call sincerity, gratitude, commitment, sacrifice. These have had a long history of human context.
Very nice.
A long history.
And psychic being is in this context of evolution, development, and human contexts. And that's why this is the projection of the unborn self, which evolves. This is not the soul which is not evolving or changing. It is the being which is growing by this experience. That's how Sri Aurobindo explains it. That psychic being learns from this experience, being here, reincarnating, and learning these very things.
I am reminded here of some of these Vedic hymns to Agni Vaishvana, where it says, this is the immortal, in the mortals who grows through the embodiment, who sits in the heart.
Right. These are more Vaishnavic in a sense. If we look at Vaishnava and Shaiva traditions, we will find very interesting distinction between the two. Why these two at the end are so important? Because Shaivic would be this exactly this coming from, this divinity which holds all nature on his shoulders. And fire is his son, who is the divinity hidden in nature rising to heaven. And Vaishnava would be always that who comes from above, and Indra is his ally and elder brother who brings his light, according to the Veda, down. So these two have to meet, Indra and Agni. Agni represents Rudra and Indra represents Vishnu, and they have to join. So the uninvolved divine with involved divine have to meet. And it's kind of interesting dynamics. But I will not stop at it because here is somebody who studies Mishka, studies Rig Veda, so we can go into it and never come out. But here there are two approaches to consciousness. Through consciousness, how it functions, operations, and these verities which the psychic being, the soul within us. Sri Aurobindo says also, we read this, that there are secret operations in us, in our subconscious and superconscious selves, which precede this action, any action, but of these we are not aware in our surface being. And therefore, for us, they do not exist. If we knew of them, our whole conscious functioning would be changed. And this is also interesting why we do not know about them, because we have to go on functioning as we are. And this is the way how evolution takes place, and it's important not to know everything, because then we will stop functioning the way we are supposed to. That's why they are hidden for us. It's an interesting thing to think, why we don't know what we know now.
We might point out also that those so-called verities or inherent qualities of consciousness, we also don't know until they are brought forth by experience, but they're already there as potentials. Courage and sincerity are necessary energies that make consciousness possible, just as the faculties make consciousness possible. But both of those realms are evolving through many species and many lifetimes until we're able to embody perfect sincerity and perfect sight also.
It's very, very interesting question, how sincerity helps us to develop our faculties. If I'm not sincere in speech, would I develop the speech faculty really to the higher capacity? Most probably not. There would be some kind of, or mind, if it is not sincere. How could it find something, or discover if it is not sincere? So, and so on, or not courageous mind, who is shrinking every time when it has a problem. So these are very interesting kind of interactions.
And I would like to jump into the paradigm here to point something out. If you remember that six-pointed star, which has sight and thinking on one side, and speaking and hearing on the other side, if we were just reading words like courage and sincerity, those would mean something more or less empty to everybody. But by speaking and hearing about courage and sincerity, those forms take on a meaning that simply looking at the words in a sentence will not have. And so this apprehension and comprehension are facilitated by both of these sets of faculties, but the one that really gives us comprehension is the sound.
Unexpected conclusion.
Just reading about these things will not give it to us.
Maybe. This is something very deep which I can't say.
There is a famous book called Courage to Be,
Courage to be.
by a famous theologian from United States, Harvard University. Courage to Be. The whole idea
Killick, right?
that our being stays submerged and our consciousness stays submerged because we are hesitant to walk into light. And therefore we lack courage. So the courage to be. A fascinating book and idea.
We can feel this. We always lack courage to be. And this question to be or not to be is about this, about courage to be.
There is a Latin motto called Sapere Aude, courage to be wise. So courage has many connotations, and even Krishna speaks to Arjuna for courage.
Yeah, because he lost his courage. According to Krishna, Arjuna didn't see it; he saw the reason. Very interesting. It is only one of the 12 major faculties, major verities which we have to have in order to manifest our soul. That's according to the mother. One of these is courage, and represents Mahakali's way of dealing with reality. We lack it quite a bit. And courage towards divinity also, towards real life. We don't have it. We are stuck with the small life we already created, and we are comfortable with.
One question. I wonder, these are powers of the mother, aren't they? Don't they come from that? So they come from like the higher divine nature. And I don't know. So they're a part of consciousness or qualities of the divine consciousness.
Yeah, we will come to it at the end, the whole sign. We will look into these 4 powers of the mother and all these faculties or verities of our soul. They belong to the 4 powers of the mother. And it's kind of interesting. This is Paraprakriti, our higher nature. So in that sense, there is no contradiction. Our soul represents her nature. I will leave this till the end. So here these are the faculties, Samjnana, Ajnana, Vijnana, Prajnana. We spoke about them. These are higher secret operations of consciousness, as Srila says, about which we are not aware. And I will go one by one through all of them, explaining what they are and how it works. We dwelt already on this statement that everything begins with vibrational movement, original kshoba disturbance. If there is no movement of conscious being, it can only know its own pure static existence without existence. Without vibrational movement of being in consciousness, there can be no act of knowledge and therefore sense. Without vibrational movement of being in force, there can be no object of sense. And this is kind of interesting. The consciousness force is one consciousness which operates in a double manner. On one side, it generates knowing what it is. On the other side, it generates the form. On the other side, the name, the knowing of the form. So every form here in this world knows how to be. Why? Because there is consciousness behind it, knowing what it is. Why this table, this computer stands here still and serves well our purpose? Because there is consciousness behind it, which holds these elements in this particular formation, doing this particular work. And we are all sitting here also, and the whole world is held together, the whole universe doing and rotating and moving and interacting in a meaningful fashion, and everybody knows what to do in this world because consciousness is behind it, behind every form. It's not just the form, it's charged with consciousness. And here we can see it clearly that any vibration, that's his statement, and then he says what is Sanjnana, what is essential sense, is the movement of conscious being as knowledge becoming sensible of itself as movement of force. In other words, the knowledge separating itself from its own working, to watch that and to take it into itself again, by feeling. This is the basis of universal Sanjnana. This is true for both internal and external operations. So it means if I perceive this table and I know that it is a table, it is because I already knew before that it is a table. Only now I play a game with it, so to say, that I didn't know it, and I discovered it. So there is as if the inner sense of this world already known to me totally, and I am kind of matching with that screen within myself, all that what is appearing here. And once it is matched, I say, I know it, I discovered it. But truly speaking, I knew it from the beginning. And this is the universal sense. Sense, consciousness. Consciousness already knows the being totally, but it plays with it because it takes the element of it and makes out of it a kind of partial presentation in time and space, and approaches it in a new fashion, as if it didn't know it. So I identify with it and I discover it. I know it now in this particular presentation.
But I'm sorry, but there is also a denial of not knowing. For instance, when the Spaniards discovered the New World, for next 6 decades they were trying to ask this question: are the people they have discovered, are they human or not? And if they are not human, how can you make them into Christians? And it was really until 1555 that it was decided, yes, they are human. So even discovery are not, table is a simpler question, I think, but discovery is the other human, like me. And if he or she is human like me, then how do I relate to that? Is a black person like me, a woman like me? And so this whole idea of empathy, the whole philosophy of mind is to discover the otherness of the other being as an expression of myself.
Yeah, the otherness is also a very important element of diversity, but also the diversity, the diversifying element. To learn to appreciate it, one has to have a sense of oneness, as Vedic Rishi said. But these Spaniards, they didn't have that sense of oneness, and they were not looking for it even. So in that case, of course, it's quite dangerous kind of movement of the mind, very critical and destructive. And that's what we face. But it is no more than that. I don't think it's more, there is some deeper sense of it. It's just ignorance in its pure sense. There is no deeper question of consciousness whatsoever. You interested?
No.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I know, I take time, long time. But what is interesting in this, and this is important to understand, that in bringing of the object of sense, or the in bringing of the action of force back to oneself, and recognizing it in a new fashion, again, this would be the appearance of consciousness. Not that original consciousness which knows the being, but this which knows the being in this particular presentation. In this presentation, in whatever presentation, it wants to know it now, and you, and this is the sense. It's a wonderful definition, beautiful, very precise, and without extra words. So here he gives this quotation which is very beautifully describing this. I become angry because by a vibration of conscious force acting as a nervous emotion, and I feel the anger that I have become by another movement of conscious force acting as a light of knowledge within me immediately. I know that I am angry automatically, because the consciousness force is like this. One part knows what it is already. I may deny it. I say, no, I am not angry. But it is something else. Yes? No, it is not that I don't know it. I know it. I feel it. I feel it because it is there. It's not only the force, but it is also a light of knowledge. I am conscious of my body because I have become the body. I have become this presentation. That the same force of conscious being, which has made this form of itself, this presentation of its workings, knows it in that form, in that presentation. It can know nothing, I can know nothing except what I myself am. And this is a beautiful statement of knowing, knowledge by identity. I cannot know nothing except what I myself am. This is beautiful. I think it's just the definition of consciousness. What I am, that I know. And I have to identify it with myself. That's how I would know it. Otherwise, how would I would know something? It's just an information. It's not knowledge. I may carry so many things in the mind, in the memory, or somebody told me something. It's not knowing. Knowing is something else. It's an immediate contact with myself. If I know others, it is because they are also myself. Because myself has assumed these apparently alien presentations as well as that which is nearest to my own mental center. And this is nearest to my own mental center also is a very interesting definition, not necessarily directly, but through the mind. All sensations, all action of sense is thus the same in essence, whether external or internal, physical or psychic. The same story everywhere. Outwardly, inwardly, innermost consciousness. Now I'm coming to that where I left. I have a little more time. And we will look into these major presentations of secret operations. Samjnana, it is the definition by Sri Aurobindo, you see the quote once. Samjnana is the contact of consciousness with an image of things by which there is a sensible possession of it in its substance. If prajna can be described as outgoing of apprehensive consciousness, to possess its object in conscious energy, to know it, samjnana can be described as an inbringing movement of apprehensive consciousness, which draws the object placed before it back to itself, so as to possess it in conscious substance, to feel it. I know it's for the mind it's a work, but try to do it. You would not regret. This is really a powerful and proper definition of how consciousness works. So there are two apprehensive movements of consciousness. One is outgoing prajnana, to know the image of things as such, without identifying with oneself, distinguishing from oneself, looking at it as something else, otherness from self. But for that otherness, you have to have a sense of self. And you have to hold that image of things with yourself, tied to yourself, in order to know that it is not yourself. So outgoing, apprehensive, notice, not comprehensive. We are not comprehending it. We're just stating the availability. So it is there as such, and other is in bringing the image of things as something else into oneself in order to feel it, in order to possess it in conscious substance, to make one's own self, to become it, to become that object, to make it one's own property.
Is that comprehension?
This is not yet comprehension. This
Can you
one,
clarify that distinction for me?
yeah, we will come. We will come to two more, which are comprehensive, and you will see immediately the difference. This is still apprehensive.
But when you bring it into yourself and you become it,
Yeah,
that
you are not
sounds
yet
like-
knowing it. You are
that
holding.
sounds like comprehension.
Yes, not yet. Comprehension is understanding it. It is only becoming one with its in substance with it. Becoming totally holding it, but not yet. Since these four are immediate, we do not distinguish them. We think this is the knowing, but the knowing follows. Did you notice this? That every time to know something, you first concentrate, yeah? And the knowing, the understanding is always delayed. Did you notice that understanding is following, never preceding? Sometimes preceding, but it's another matter. You can look when and how. So when you want to know something, it takes time for comprehension to come. So this is that delay. So you take it into yourself, and then you will know it. You will understand it. Not know it, understand it. Comprehension is understanding how it is interwoven into the bigger world, what it is doing, how it is relating to you. You can't really figure out from apprehension. So, this is samjnana. I will go one by one. It's very interesting. Prajnana. Prajnana is the consciousness which holds an image of things before it as an object, with which it has to enter into relations and possess by apprehension and analytic and synthetic cognition. Analyzing it as such. Oh, this is the part, oh, they come together. But they are not me. They are outside. This object is not myself. It is different, and I analyze it as such. So all the analysis, all the scientific approach is based on this, learning things as such, without me interfering, without me being identified with. But without this identification, prajnana would be not possible. If I don't hold the image of things, I would not be able to enter with it in this by apprehension of analytic and synthetic. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah? For everyone? For some?
I was wondering, so English is not my native language, because apprehension, sometimes I always think about apprehension is like almost having a fear of something else.
So we say, I apprehend there is somebody in the room.
Right.
And this it's always has a sort of negative connotation.
No. But
Is it not so?
pronder, it means to take.
So I say
To take. It comes from the word prendre in French. To take.
That's the word.
It is a taking. It has nothing to do with negativity.
Take.
To take, yes. You take something and you bring it, apprehend. You take it and you bring it in front of your consciousness and you see what it is.
But
I like these
English
two.
language, I am trying to think of another sentence which say I apprehend that there's something else going on behind my back. I apprehend. I mean, there's a sense of, I sense sometimes.
Shall I open the dictionary?
You know,
Yeah.
in fact, we can spend
No, I mean
hours and hours on this particular concept, because the science of epistemology in the last few hundred years, from intuitive epistemology to scientific epistemology to phenomenological epistemology, all of these pursuits have unpacked this concept to an incredibly great degree. And I don't think we have time really to parse all of those subtle aspects. You know, this is a concept that sort of generally explains the difference between apprehension and comprehension. And I think we have to admit that this happens. Exactly how it happens is not really explained here. And it's basically not possible to explain, but it is possible to examine in great detail. And I don't think that's what we're heading towards here. It's more like
Concept.
a concept of how consciousness works. So somehow we grasp the object and bring it into our awareness. And that's this notion.
We will come to more understanding at the end when we examine all four, and we'll see. I will take any action. We will take it, as an example, and examine four faculties operating within this perception. What is happening? What we need in order to recognize things. We need four different movements of consciousness simultaneously present, or maybe successively present, but in the speed which is beyond our comprehension. We can't really see and understand.
Vladimir, I think Nishta, if I understand right, is I had the same feeling that because we are not English native speakers, maybe you can explain to us in one sentence about when Sringo talk about apprehending and comprehending, what does it exactly mean in English, so that we have that clear.
Right.
Is that what I understand right?
Somebody can explain English speaking what comprehension and well, there is a difference between apprehensive is not knowing, it's not understanding, it's just I will explain to you as I understand. It's perceiving or getting availability of things. I apprehend, that means there is something there, but what it is I don't understand. So understanding is something else than apprehending. Here it fits also well with this, that I apprehend something is there. I apprehend that this is something, but what it is I have to comprehend. I have to understand that this is the projector, but I already apprehended that it is there. You see, apprehension doesn't give you understanding. It is only stating the availability of something.
So one of the steps that has been taken in the hundreds of years of this examination is that we immediately perceive what is there. And then we mediate
Right.
that perception with analysis and synthetic cognition, which means that we assimilate that which is immediate. So describing what happens absolutely every second of our life.
So prajnana is this objective knowing or recognizing that it is not me. But for that it has to be connected with me before. So some jnana has to take place in order for me to deal with it in an analytical scientific way. I have to hold the image of things in order to deal with it. I can't hold it. If I don't hold it, it will go. It will not stay. I will not be able to examine it as such. These are two comprehensive movements, very logically available. We can understand why they're there for us to operate with the world. But there are two.
Now it's comprehensive.
Now we are moving into two comprehensive, which give us the understanding of what it is. Now these were two apprehensive, outgoing and in bringing, holding with myself, and then outgoing and examining. With gestures one can explain these things. So here I will skip this, it's mine, I will go to this. There are two comprehensive faculties. Vijnana is the original comprehensive consciousness, which holds an image of things in its essence, totality, and parts and properties. It is the original, spontaneous, true, and complete view of it, which belongs properly to the supermind, and of which mind has only a shadow in the highest operations of the comprehensive intellect. We have also comprehensive intellect, which can give us an understanding. We can logically examine, we can connect things, relate things in the mind. This is what philosophy does, looking for the meaning. Meaning is given by that supramental consciousness, which holds all things in meaningful oneness. All the properties are related there. It's like spotter theory, which is explaining that we can communicate because we already presume the oneness of the world. We all presume it. And because on that ground we can really communicate. We presume that all things are meaningfully related. This is this comprehension.
And already meaningfully related.
Already meaningful.
Before we know them.
Yeah,
So we just jumped into a realm of consciousness which is beyond the horizontal individual business of perception.
how do we see this vijnana in the action of or perception of anything? If I perceive this, I hold it with myself, then I examine, oh, there are things in it. These two, apprehensive and comprehensive. What is happening here? And it's kind of interesting. I see this with a relation to the hand, because it's in the hand, and relation that it is to be used for the eyes. Yes, this is all known by this, and the eyes are seeing, and there's many things here which are distinguished from it as, so they are all supporting this for me, because this is functional for all here, and everything in you, whatever you have there, is functional to all of this here, what is outside and inside. Everything is meaningfully related. These chairs are standing on these mats, on this floor, on this foundation, this building is here built. It's all meaningfully related. All the trees here giving shade, sun, the earth is rotating, running around the sun rotates in the universe. There is a black hole holding the gravitational wave, and we are all turned a little, tilted towards it. We have the season coming, spring. Everything is related. This is not a separate thing. And that was the difficulty of the artificial intellect. They started to create this artificial intellect. They couldn't explain to the computer what it is. If you say, for example, the book, it will ask, what is the book? And you say, it is the thing. It will ask, what is thing? Now you have to go into thing. More you explain, more it is. To read, what is to read? What is to understand? Who is reading? Man is reading. How it is made. So you have to explain the whole world to explain one thing, smallest here on earth or in this universe. Everything is meaningfully related. And this is vijnana. If that would be not there, comprehension would not be possible. We would not understand what it is. We would apprehend, but we would not understand. Makes sense. It's only in this totality of relations that understanding can come in.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Ajna. And the last, comprehensive. Ajnana is the operation by which consciousness dwells on an image of things so as to govern and possess it in power. These four, therefore, are the basis of all conscious action. About Ajnana, he doesn't say much, I do not know why, but I can develop. So it is outgoing, dwells on the image, to govern and to possess it, anything, in power, at my will, at my own comprehension. I understand this as such, and I will use it as such at my will. I can break it now. I can put it in here. This is Ajnana. If the Ajnana would not be there, the operations within consciousness would not be possible, according to the understanding of what it is. Beautiful.
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't follow that last thing.
If Ajnana would not be possible, then operation, we would not be able to operate in accordance to what we understand it is.
To act according to the
Everything acts
understanding.
according to what it is. All our mistakes are also like this, you know. We think that it is that, and we act like this, and it was wrong. So, but that would not be possible to act if I would not be able to impose and to possess it in power. That I have power over it. I can break it. Yeah? It's my power. It's my decision. I think it's not good. I break it. I think it's very good. I put it on the walls. So it is in accordance of my comprehension that I can act and express my attitude, my consciousness towards any image of things, any object. And this expression is this ajnana, imposing myself onto the object, willing it, acting with will upon it. So here these four, we can see them four in every action of consciousness. Every. They are all indispensable. Without these four, nothing is possible. They act, and they are immediate. Yeah? So we don't even distinguish them. I put this from one hand to another, and I don't even think about it. But with this, taking this and putting into another hand requires all these faculties, four operations to be there. I have to hold it within myself. I have to know it's not me. I have to comprehend it into the relation of all my hands and myself, you. I have to act upon it with will. Every action.
Vladimir, how about, he says that Vijnana is a faculty of supermind. We are still in the process of realizing supermind.
Right.
So
He
how
says
come
something else also.
that faculty is already in us now? The comprehension, you know?
It's unconscious in us.
Oh yeah, okay.
Properly to the supermind, of which mind has only a shadow of the highest operations of the comprehensive intellect. This comprehensive intellect of the philosophers, most probably, but also.
The shadow of light.
I would like to mention again in the course which I've been doing on the philosophy of consciousness, we can see that during the 17th and 18th century, the empiricists were dwelling in this to try to define the processes of apprehension. And then, with the idealists and the phenomenologists of the later 18th and 19th century, they became more preoccupied with defining this level of comprehension. So that we can see a kind of linear temporal development of the whole, but the whole didn't get grasped immediately. But in this definition of Sri Aurobindo, he already knew that people were talking about this in the early 20th century, and he read Hegel and Bergson and those people also. So he was able to draw from the Upanishads all the elements of the definition of consciousness, which was slowly being worked out in philosophy over several centuries.
It's really a profound thing. If you start noticing how we operate in this world, you will notice also. He gives examples. Unfortunately, I didn't prepare the quotations. He gives examples from nature, from human relations, how these four operate in his essays on Kena Upanishad. If you find it, please read that. It's the most wonderful psychological commentary ever made. So if we study these faculties, we can see that behind them lurking these operations, lurking the faculties of the mind, of the sight, of the hearing and seeing, and speaking. And here, if we look at them as, this was my definition, because suddenly I saw that behind every of these major faculties is the essential approach to knowledge, which is expressed in terms as we know it as a mind, active seeing as seeing, as hearing and speaking. Hearing and speaking comprehensive, seeing and thinking apprehensive. We do not split them in this way. It's a new way of thinking on these things. We think mind is comprehending, but it comprehends because of Vijnana faculty in it, or the faculty of hearing in it. So to say, if I simplify, would be very interesting, that we see something, it's one thing, we apprehend that it is there, I can see it, yeah? But when I hear it, I understand what it is. When I see, I apprehend. I must see, because I must establish contact with myself. But then, to understand it, I must hear it. It has to vibrate for me. It has to connect all the vibrations for the whole world. All the relations have to come to it, and that would be the meaning of it. The meaning is not in this thing which I see, but in how it acts, relates to others, to other beings. The relations are meaning, and not the appearance of the thing.
This is something to be taken from a seminar and contemplated and integrated into one's own perception. Just to say what you just said takes time for people or a person to really comprehend the difference between hearing and seeing something. And I think, the meaning of a seminar is that you take some seeds for further development. And this is one. This is an important one.
Well, it's a simplified way of saying, because we are using our faculties for the operations. And I imposed the language of faculties on the operations, which is not totally valid. But it gives a sense, sense of wonder, how it could be, how we really understand what it is. Through the word, through the meaning, through the name. And name gives us relations, gives us all the meaningful relations between objects. Is something which is not visible. You can't see it. You see the thing, but you can't see how it is used. How do you know that these are glasses? Until I put them on myself. So if I don't put them on myself, you would not know what it is. Okay, not this. I can show something you really don't know. And until you see how it acts, how it relates to other things, you may not know what it is. You see the color, you see the shape, you may guess something, but you are not totally aware. I mean, sometimes in the supermarkets we see things which we don't comprehend what it is for, new thing. And they have to explain to you, this is like this. Or you come to some city and you see this beautiful castle, and you're just beautiful castle, but you don't know what it is. And then a tourist guide comes, in 17th century there lived a king, and he's this, and you know it through the word. You don't know it from seeing. You just have a contact with it, first initial contact. But knowing takes wider scope of vibrations, names, events which are not visible. They are not visible. That's why hearing is not visible. The word is not visible until it is, of course, embodied.
When I read something, and then I have this, I just wonder about how it is when I read something, because I see the words, but at the same time I have the words kind of, I don't know if it's a memory or something, but I have the words that sound in me. Right?
Sometimes you have them, sometimes you don't. You wait for them, for the words to explain to you. So you saw the thing and you just wonder what it is, and it will come later. Or you have it immediately. This is it. I know what it is. And you know it by the word. We did this exercise first time. I was showing you what it is. Can you describe? No, and they were clever. They avoided glasses. They said it is, transparent and green and this shape. But everything, transparent, green, shade, everything, all these words are words. How would you know that this is transparent if the word will not tell you? It's a big question.
Yeah, I think Melody's question has to do with two types. When you read, when your mind is silent, how the words come to you different. It's different when the mind is still going on, has associations. So that answer to your question is dependent on which state of mind we read. But we can discuss offline.
Yet there's part of us, our ego, which pretends, wishes to jump to a conclusion and say, I know it, I understand. And it can come out of a sheer ignorance and obstinacy of ego.
We are not safeguarded from it. Yeah? We are open to all the mistakes. And as long as we are moving and looking for answers, it is okay. Of course, if we kind of insist, then we are wrong. But examining is always good.
So can we say that knowing is one step and experiencing is the next step?
Apprehending is the first step usually, and comprehending is the second step usually, which we know as knowing or understanding.
Yeah, but then experiencing is the next step. Because by experiencing, you're really aware of that.
Experiencing maybe is the conclusive of all the four faculties being, how to say, successful. And then you have an experience.
Yeah, I was going to just say something related. I think that, we all utilize all four of these faculties, and we do it more or less perfectly. So like to have the true comprehension, you have to be in supermind. But, we have, we can have an ignorant comprehension, which is completely wrong, or we can have, one that's works pretty well, but it's not completely right either. So we can have all these different levels, right? And then when you say we're not experiencing it, I think you mean something like you comprehend it at a very high level.
Yeah.
That you really take it in its full context. But
Most probably.
For example, when you reach the enlightenment, it's because you don't know everything, but you have experienced everything. So you are truly living that. So you are enlightened. It's something that you cannot explain to someone else, but someone else has to experience it.
Here we do something a bit different than unexplained enlightenment position. I'm finishing in 1 minute. We have to have a call.
That is like he's going to lose his time.
No, it doesn't
I'm not
matter.
going- I'm not
We
going
can do it a bit longer, we can wait also. We can delay the session before lunch.
Right. And
No, yeah, it depends.
Can you finish that sentence?
Right. It is an interesting issue because that's why Nishka is interested to hear this thing. It's really an interesting thing. We are interested to see how consciousness works. We are not interested in getting into enlightenment without understanding. By the way, Sri Aurobindo says about this, that his ideal is not only to get enlightenment, not only, notice, it is the first step, but also to see and to understand everything what is happening afterwards in transformation, how consciousness works. Our task is a bit more difficult than just going for enlightenment without explanation, burning all the bridges behind and jumping into bliss. It's not our purpose or our aim. Our aim is to see the meaning in everything, how it is being embodied. Actually, this life is our gain, our aim, and not the enlightenment per se. It's important for us because without it we will not know this world. But if we are going only for it, then there are other methodologies developed very well, Buddhistic, Hinduistic, which we could utilize and get moksha. And that would be it. We don't need to know this world. We don't need to know how we function, what is happening here. Yes? So here, this kind of answer I must give. So it is important, enlightenment, to know better things, but not for the sake of running away from this world. Just opposite, to come back here and to see how this mystery unfolds. That's why we are interested in this knowledge.
So next Saturday you would go through the varieties of the psychic being? What is
Yes, next
No,
will be
Thursday. Okay, Thursday.
Okay, will be Thursday, 4:45 in that other room. We will have a presentation on these varieties. I will show you to intrigue you a little bit, because this is beautiful. We will kind of dwell on them, on these faculties or qualities of the psychic being. And we will take Mother Symbol with all the with colors and with meanings. It's always beautiful to dwell on them, just to get the sense of it. It's more feminine approach to consciousness, more beautiful than these faculties, comprehending, apprehending. This would be like a flower. All right, so I stop here and we have some tea. And on Thursday, 4:45, we will meet in that room to continue this presentation. Not on Saturday here. Saturday here we continue with something else, which we will decide.
Which is the same.
Which will be the same, a little bit differently. You will see how we incorporate our disciplines, subjects of studies, philosophy, psychology, art, linguistics, sociology. You will see that we found them special niches into which we will locate them in order to see how we could approach our studies in a different manner. Now, knowing the faculties, it's kind of interesting how to become philosopher, not just a professor of philosophy or psychologist, or what is the difference between philosophy and psychology. We will be defining all these things next time. Next. Okay, I'm going to stop and have some tea.